We all have movies that we basically watched on repeat when we were children. Movies you swear you have seen 1,000 times because you remember watching them until the VHS broke from rewinding it too many times. The problem with these films, however, is upon revisiting them, they often don't hold up. We drum them up so much in our minds that it's almost impossible for them to meet our expectations. Or, in most cases, the movies suck and have always sucked, and our tastes as 5-year-olds was just bad. This was my expectation when revisiting Spirit, Stallion of the Cimaron. I've watched this film a couple of times over the past year, and I have found that it not only holds up, but I appreciate it more as an adult, and now consider it one of the most underrated films of all time. Spirit, Stallion of the Cimaron is an animated film from DreamWorks Animation. It was directed by Kelly Asbury and Lorna Cook, and written by John Fusco, and it stars the voice of Matt Damon. The film follows a wild stallion in the Old West during the time the Americans were first settling there. The stallion, Spirit, gets captured and has to find its way home. Along the way, Spirit makes enemies with the U.S. Army colonel, friends with a Lakota named Little Creek, and lovers with his horse. That sounds really weird now that I said it out loud. But eventually Spirit and Little Creek win their freedom, and Spirit returns home. The plot is simple, but it lends well to the 83-minute runtime, and it overall is well paced and never really gets bogged down or even goes too fast. On the music end of things, Bryan Adams was brought in along with film legend Hans Zimmer. Both give top-notch efforts here. The songs are for the most part excellent and are a key reason as to why this film works. The lyrics are all from Spirit's perspective, which allows the viewer to sympathize more with him. It also allows the film to bring its themes to the forefront while maintaining some subtlety. The standout songs are easily Can't Take Me, Here I Am, and Sound the Bugle. Can't Take Me is hard, uplifting, and inspiring, with that you can't keep me down, don't give a fuck mentality. This Is Me is the first song that plays in the film and does an excellent job in setting up Spirit's arc and showing the magic of a newborn and the charm of seeing the world for the first time. Sound the Bugle is the song that plays at Spirit's low point in the narrative. It's not raw or angry or inspiring like its brother, You Can't Take Me. No, it's not at all. It's sad and broken, like it's just holding on, scraping every last bit of will from what it has at the bottom of the tank. It starts out saying Sound the Bugle, saying that Spirit has given up. However, he realizes freedom is worth fighting for and digs deep to pick himself up with the empowering cry of, "You're a soldier now, fighting in a battle to be free once more. Yeah, that's worth fighting for." I can't, however, in good conscience not give special mention to Brothers Under the Sun. There are also other tracks I love, but we don't have time to go through all of them. The score for the film is not in the upper echelon of Hans Zimmer's scores, but that's more of a compliment to him as opposed to a slight on this work. Sure, it's not as good as The Lion King and the myriad of excellent pieces that would come later in Hans's career, but at the very least, the music accompanies and complements what is unfolding on screen, and at its best, it elevates the strong moments to emotionally powerful and memorable ones. Hans's score also goes a long way to allowing the filmmakers to show, don't tell, and maintain subtlety in their delivery. I certainly would not be talking about Spirit in the same tone if it was not for this masterpiece of a soundtrack that perfectly complements the narrative. The animation quality is fine. It's a step down from Disney, but it's still strong, although I am far from an animation expert, so take what I say with a grain of salt. The part that is by far the worst in this regard is the CG. But to be fair, all films that used late 90s, early 2000s CG animation alongside traditional animation or live action probably regret it now, as the technology of the time just hasn't aged well, to say the least. The animation in Spirit's character shines when he acts like a horse would, but still displays emotion and human characteristics. Like when your dog does something that is similar to how a human would react, it's cute and creates a bond with you and your dog. The same can be said here. When Spirit remains in character by not breaking the rules of the world and acts like a horse but still conveys his thoughts and emotions, the film works and Spirit's character definitely comes through. The worst part of Spirit's character in the animation is when Spirit breaks the rules of the world and starts acting not like a horse would. This completely undermines the point of not having Spirit talks and breaks immersion. Unfortunately, this happens too many times over the course of the film. The environments are also drawn with impressive breadth, color, and lighting, which really draws you into its setting. Often they use really cool effects and style to add a lot of flavor to the film as well, which is really appreciated. The final part of the animation worth mentioning is how much momentum the riding scenes and flying scenes are given. You really feel the weight of the movement and the freedom and speed they are meant to inspire. One of the bigger criticisms against this film was the horse romance. On one hand, I agree. It's cheesy as hell and overall just uncomfortable. To be fair though, I do not envy the creators, as I don't think there was any good way to establish Spirit's relationship. Also, these parts of the film are pretty short-lived and don't take away too much from the focus of the narrative. But yeah, it's certainly cringy as hell and definitely gag-worthy. Outside of this shot, of course, which really works. The three most important characters are Spirit, Little Creek, and the Colonel. I think the most interesting thing about these characters is that they, in a way, are all the same person. All three are more or less defined by their stubbornness. Spirit is obviously as stubborn as they come, especially with his willingness to do whatever it takes to get home. The Colonel is also extremely stubborn. I love when they are briefing him on the important information about troop deployment and he isn't listening. All he cares about at that point is breaking the new horse. This is really what makes the scene when the Colonel tries to break Spirit. Little Creek is probably the least stubborn, but he too will do anything to be free and thus is a mirror of Spirit. We also see him being very stubborn and trying to ride Spirit. However, Little Creek recognizes Spirit deserves to be free and not be ridden. We've seen an immovable object and an unstoppable force be played out on the big screen before. But seeing three immovable objects go at it is also very entertaining. At the end, when Spirit and Little Creek make the jump for freedom, the Colonel stops his soldier from firing and gives them the nod of approval. For me, this really cemented his character. As stubborn as he is also fair. He knows when he's been beat. And the fact that you know he is going against his stubbornness, a trait we've been shown as one that defines him, only makes this moment more badass, and makes us empathize with him a little more and makes him even more believable. In the end, when Little Creek and Spirit depart and go their separate ways, it does sting a lot. The film is set up that Spirit wants nothing more than to go home, but the time comes and it's harder than you thought it would be, as throughout the course of the entire film you're doing nothing but rooting for Spirit. The film does a great job at having them go through an impressive amount of ordeals together over the runtime of the film, from escaping the military fort, to Spirit saving Little Creek when the army attacks, to Little Creek tracking Spirit down and saving him after the train crash, to finally them making the jump of freedom together. The moment is bittersweet though. They have won their freedom and are finally able to go home. However, this brings up an interesting point and draws me back to one of the first lines.
Whether that West was won or lost in the end, you'll have to decide for yourself.
Did they win? We know the characters won their freedom, but we also know from history that the West was civilized, so to speak, and the Colonel actually does end up winning. This swings the meter for the ending more towards the bitter side. But when you think about how maybe Spirit and Little Creek winning is supposed to be them winning the spirit, no pun intended, of the West, winning the soul of freedom to live on in future generations, this swings the end back towards sweet. These questions that viewers can ponder long after the credits roll are what make the ending so strong and Spirit great as a whole, even though technically the ending is when Spirit goes home. This part is fine, but it could have been a little more triumphant and impactful, as all the emotion is really being derived from the music. Spirit keeps its central ideas at the forefront of its narrative without feeling too preachy, a trap some children's movies fall into. Its ideas of home, identity, holding on to hope, and always keep fighting speak to universal truths of the human condition. It uses solid, albeit sometimes obvious symbolism, but in a movie geared towards younger audiences, that's fine. I love the eagle and how it symbolizes freedom, and it makes it much more satisfying when Spirit can eventually run with him again. This film can be emotional, melancholy, beautiful, subtle, and awe-inspiring at times. It has those deeper levels that you can dig into and think about. Spirit, Stallion, and the Cimaron is certainly an underrated gem in the sea of films. It also marks what DreamWorks could have been. Following the success of Shrek, the studio really started to move away from the style, tone, and more adult focus of films like this and The Prince of Egypt, in favor of more financially friendly, not funny, mediocre kids movies. Until now, where mediocre would be a generous word to use on some of their more recent releases. Yes, the era of Spirit might have been B-rate Disney, but it was still B-rate Disney, and that is still really good. And these artists that clearly had something to offer are either trapped behind working on garbage or have had to move on to different opportunities. And Spirit shines as an example of what DreamWorks could have been. In the end, Spirit, Stallion, and Cimaron is going to fall just short of masterpiece status. It's a film that's simple enough to capture the attention of a child and complex enough to entertain the mind of an adult. And it is most definitely a strong and easy recommendation to make for anyone that has never seen Spirit, Stallion, and Cimaron.
Don't judge a thing till you know what's inside. Don't push me